Hey, I'm going to Korea in a few weeks. Any places you'd recommend? Oh, well, Korea has a lot of nice islands like Muido, Jeju-do, Ulleungdo, and another island that's really close to it, Dokdo. I found all the other islands on Google Maps, but I can't seem to find any island under the name Dokdo. What is it? Here's why you've probably never heard of Dokdo. Everything you need to know about the tiny islands. This video will only be a simplified version of the presentation. Dokdo is about 200 kilometers away from South Korea and Japan, and it is about 187,544 square meters in total. These tiny islands, even much smaller than Boston, are very beautiful and attract 500 tourists daily. So why aren't these tiny islands not more well known? Well, that's because it has three names: Dokdo, Liancourt Rocks, and Takeshima. This "which title should we give it" controversy may seem like just a petty disagreement, but the first conflict between the two countries date back to over 100 years ago. In 1910, Japan took over Korea and tried to erase the presence of Korean culture and history, and also unfairly treated them by forcing them into working in Japan or as sex slaves. Korea was under Japan's rule for 35 years, then regained independence in 1945 after Japan surrendered in World War II. However, Japan has still not yet formally apologized to Korea. The tension between the two countries is still very strong. So keeping this in mind, let's look at Korea's point of view on this name dispute situation. What does the name Dokdo mean to Korea? Korea's records of Dokdo start in 1145 in a document named 삼국사기, though it is more specifically stated in a document named the 세종실록 7지, written in 1454. These state that Dokdo is under the rule of a smaller Korean province. There are even two Japanese documents that state that Japan has no relation to the islands. There are even third-party documents that declare that Dokdo is not part of Japan, such as the Supreme Commander for Allied Powers Index number 677 and the San Francisco Peace Treaty. Additionally, having ownership of the island has a very sentimental value to Korea, as it would represent Japan's complete withdrawal from Korean lands. One author even stated that giving up Dokdo would be like political suicide for Korea. Additionally, Dokdo is de facto controlled by Korea, as Koreans don't need a passport to visit Dokdo, while the Japanese and everyone else do need one. If you ever visit Dokdo, you'll notice that all services there are Korean. I think this reason itself is pretty convincing, but let's take a look at Japan's position as well to understand the name Takeshima. First, let's point out a few flaws in Korea's claims. The first record of Dokdo, 삼국사기, does not directly state Takeshima as being one of Korea's lands. It is just an inference made by Korean scholars, which lower the reliability of the document. The peace treaty also does not directly state Takeshima as being removed from Japanese power, and the Scapin 677 state that the document cannot be used as ultimate determination of the minor islands. Japan's first record of Takeshima in 1666 is a Totori domain record about a Japanese man's annual fishing trip that went through Takeshima. Additionally, Takeshima played a big role in Japan's victory during the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 to 1905, which gives it a pretty big role in Japan's overall history. These were the claims of the main parties in this dispute, but what does the rest of the world think? The name most third-party countries use is Liancourt Rocks. It comes from the name of a French whaling ship that was almost wrecked by the rocks in 1849. Though it is unbiased between Korea and Japan, it is not very accurate because the name comes way after Korean and Japanese documents, and France is over 9,000 kilometers away from the island. The United States has directly stated that they are neutral on this topic. Here are a few different ways different world atlases have expressed the name of the island. My view on this topic is that the islets should be named Dokdo. After all the awful things Japan did to Korea and its people during its annexation, and not formally acknowledging or apologizing to this day, Japan is not in a position to take anything more from Korea. Even when looking at the factual parts only, the Korean documents date much earlier than Japan's, and even some of Japan's documents state that they have no relation to Dokdo. How do you view this controversy? If you would like to support the title Dokdo, you can share information and evidence about why the islands should be named Dokdo to your friends, family, atlas publishers, or even a local government official. I've listed a few resources you can use for more information, as well as the link to the whole presentation, which can be accessed at tinyurl.com/what'sdokdo. These are all the sites I used to create this slideshow. I hope through this you are able to understand the significance of the tiny island Dokdo. Dokdo is our land. Thank you! Wow, I didn't expect there to be such a deep meaning behind the name of a tiny island.